Would you like to play some football?
Hey, welcome back to Gridiron and the Gospel, a faith and college football podcast, another edition of this podcast, and it is a post-college football playoff semifinals edition or a pre-college football playoff national championship edition. And my name is George Schroeder.
And I'm Brad Edwards. And look, there are a lot of people were not happy when the first round of the playoff didn't produce any competitive games. But I think we would all agree if you're going to get competitive games, you want them later in the playoff, not early. And we got two great games, two great finishes in these two semifinals. And let's start talking about them.
Well, absolutely. So your finals, which will be Monday the 20th, will be Ohio State versus Notre Dame. It is an all Midwest final. A couple of quick notes before we really move into it. All Midwest final for the first time, well, ever, at least as it relates to the playoff era going all the way back to the BCS. And before that, you didn't get those kind of matchups where it was 1 versus 2 or whatever. It was going to be a national title very often in the old bowl system. First Midwest championship ever. Second straight year, what goes along with that, with no Southeastern Conference or Southern-based team. And so those are interesting things that we can get into down the road. Does it mean anything? Does it not? I think there's some interesting things you can pull from that maybe we'll get back into later. But Ohio State beats Texas in the Cotton Bowl, and Notre Dame beats Penn State in the Orange Bowl. Those served as the semifinals. And so you've got Ohio State versus Notre Dame. I guess let's start with the second game. It's fresher on our minds. It's also probably the game that, I don't know, more people, first of all, it was weird to have these games played on a Thursday and a Friday, but it just is, okay?
Yeah.
And we're recording this Sunday night, as we usually do, and you guys are listening to it on a Monday morning or throughout the week. But we're going to start with Ohio State, Texas. It was a really good game with a dramatic ending, even though the final score is 28-14. It just, it was about everything you could want, just kind of like you alluded to in the open.
Yeah, and look, it was one of those that the way that it started, I think most of us were worried that it wasn't going to be a great game because we saw what Ohio State had done with a near perfect performance in the first two rounds against Tennessee and then against Oregon. And the reason that they were so good is because the offense found itself and they were just unstoppable from the first drive of both of those games. And so Texas, I think, got the ball to start the game and picked up one first down before punting to Ohio State. And the Buckeyes right down 7-0. And you're like, oh boy, here we go again. But then Texas managed through a combination of getting some big stops and then Ohio State a few times just kind of hurting itself with some offensive penalties to go to second and long, third and long. Texas managed to weather the storm. There were a few times, the Buckeyes are like at the Texas 40-something yard line and basically like one first down away from being in field goal range to make it a 2-score game, but they never quite got there. Texas finally was able to flip field position late in the first half, drives down, gets that touchdown with just under 30 seconds to play, and we think we're going to halftime tied at 7. Then one play, 75-yard touchdown on the screen pass to Travion Henderson, and then, it's Ohio State up 7 at the half, getting the ball to start the second half. And I don't know about you, but I'm thinking this game's going to be over if Ohio State goes right down and scores to make it, a 2-score game to start the second half. But they didn't. Texas kept getting stops. They eventually tied the game, actually got the ball back one time with the game tied, had a chance to take the lead, didn't really move it on that drive. Then, of course, a fall down 7 again. And then that sets up, I guess what we'll probably spend most of the time talking about is from first and goal at the 1-yard line, 4 shots to tie the game. And Texas doesn't do it. Not only do they not do it, but fourth down play ends up being a fumble return the other way, which, as you mentioned, gives a final score that was misleading as far as the way the game was played. But before we discuss goal to go, was there anything prior to that you want to get into or touch on that really struck you as a big takeaway from the game?
Well, I mean, a lot of places I could go with this, but I would just say this. The better team won. Let me start with that. The better team won. Ohio State is the best team.
Yep.
None of us knew what to make of them, and this is not some new take. We've actually had this opinion, I think, over the last couple of weeks on this podcast, but none of us really knew what to make of Ohio State after that stunning loss to Michigan. But once the playoffs started, we have seen the Ohio State that we thought we might see all year long. The team that has the best players, the best combination of players, the better team won. It felt like Texas was slogging its way uphill all night long on offense. And we talk about some of the Ohio State offensive things. Their defense has been a constant all year long. That's been something that's really been, I don't know, we overuse this word special. I'll use it anyway. And so that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is you talked about that, and we're going to get into that last series because I think Steve Sarkisian is really kicking himself over at least the, I think it was the second down play call. Might have been.
Yeah.
But
it was second.
When they had the ball at the 1 yard line, first and goal. But the play that was made on fourth down, sack, fumble, Jack Sawyer made the sack, picked up the fumble, and rumbled 82 yards. I mean, it felt like it took forever, but you could tell he was not going to get caught. The fact that it was Jack Sawyer is kind of cool in and of itself. There's not anybody who's really more Ohio State than him, probably. And he's one of those guys who came back after last year when he could have gone away to the pros. Now, look, they were paid very well, right? Famously, it was 15 or $20 million that Ohio State put together to retain guys and to gain guys in the portal and to put this team together. But he came back, and for him to make that play and kind of be Mr. Buckeye making the play is really cool. And it's the kind of thing that if they go on and beat Notre Dame and win the national title, that's the kind of play that he'll never buy a pizza again in Columbus, Ohio, as long as he lives. He never will. I mean, he'll always get his meal paid for and probably everything else too. And by the way, he doesn't need you to pay for his meal, Buckeyes. You're already paying him a lot of money. But I just wanted to highlight that for a second. Texas, by the way, their defense played pretty well, real well, frankly. And you know what they did? They took away Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
Remember how he just went nuts? And he's the best receiver, I think, physically, talent-wise, and just sort of weapon-wise in the country as a freshman.
Yep, as a
and
true
you
freshman.
Saw what he did to Oregon in the first half, in the quarterfinals. They took him away. He had one catch in the first half for 3 yards. But Ohio State was able to get some things done, but it wasn't easy for them. But Texas gave up the one big play you referenced earlier, the screen pass near the end of the first half. Was it Travion Henderson? Is that who it was? And other than that, it's not like Ohio State just was moving up and down the field like we thought they might because of what we saw against Tennessee and against Oregon. But they were clearly the better team. That's what I would say. That was my takeaway from the game. The better team won. And I would say the better team won both of these. When we get to the Orange Bowl and Notre Dame Penn State, I would say that too. But it was a whole lot closer in that game. So you want to talk about Texas? Despite Ohio State being, in my opinion, clearly the better team, Texas has slogged its way all the way to the 1 yard line late in the game. 3.5 minutes left, something like that. First and goal from the 1 with a combination of sort of a couple of pass interference penalties. First and goal at the 1. And they tried up the middle and it didn't go anywhere. And then on second down, they tried a pitch wide to the left side, short side of the field, if I'm remembering correctly. And it lost 7 yards. And Steve Sarkisian is a tremendous play caller.
Yeah, he's
a great game planner. He designs game plans really well, and he calls plays really well. I don't think he doesn't really get like he doesn't have the reputation of a Lincoln Riley when he was dialing up those ball plays like that for Oklahoma or whatever. But he's on par with that kind of thing. I think he's that good at offense. I guarantee you in his heart of hearts is regretting that play call. He outsmarted himself and it blew up. And the play got blown up. And all of a sudden, it's third and goal from the 8. Third and goal from the 8, which led, of course, to the fourth down play that went Ohio State's way and ended Texas's opportunity. But Thoughts on that? I mean, what would am I overdoing that with Sark? What do you think?
No, no, I don't think there's any question that he can probably think of 10 different things he could have done better than what he chose to do on second down. And obviously, it's hindsight, but at the same time, they had 4 tries to get 1 yard. And they brought in, if I remember correctly, first and goal, they brought in a big, defensive tackle as a lead blocker. And I don't know, I never watched a replay, so I don't know whether the blocker went the wrong way or whether the running back didn't follow him, or maybe I don't even remember the play correctly and it just got blown up, by the defense without Texas, having a missed assignment. But regardless, it gained nothing. It's still second and goal at the 1 yard line. And you and I discussed this afterward, and I just believe when you have Texas level of talent and you're going against another college football team, they're not going up against an NFL team. As talented as Ohio State is, Texas will get 1 yard if they run 4 quarterback sneaks from the 1 yard line. Now, they had already given one of them up by running on first down, but from that point forward, we have seen them this season in short yardage very often bring in Arch Manning to not necessarily run the ball all the time, but they have a package with him in there. So to have changed quarterbacks would not have been anything out of the ordinary for them. So instead, you leave Quinn Ewers in there. So you've got a guy, you're putting the ball into the hands on every snap of a guy who all 11 guys on defense know that he will not keep the ball.
No, wait. Quinn Ewers is perfectly capable of a quarterback sneak.
Of quarterback sneak, sure. But once that ball is snapped in the shotgun or pistol or whatever, he's not going to run with it. He's giving it to somebody else. And so you're already eliminating one guy by having him in there.
Yeah.
But so there are a bunch of ways they could have done it if they had brought Arch Manning in. But as you and I discussed, the easiest way to do it, because they have now legalized the push from behind, bring someone in. And look, if you're worried about the backup quarterback taking snaps under center because he doesn't practice that a lot, then what you said, just leave Ewers in there.
How about just because he's your better quarterback, so you leave him in there?
Well, whatever. If he's the one who's most accustomed to taking snaps from under center, bring him there, snap the ball to him, have your 300-pound guy come up from behind, push him forward. I can guarantee you do that 4 times, you will gain 1 yard, and you will have your touchdown. Now, the question is, and I can also guarantee you, if Texas had scored there with 2.5 minutes left in the game, I would have given a probably 75 to 80% chance Ohio State is now going to drive the ball down and win it at the end of regulation.
Probably, maybe.
I can't guarantee you that's going to happen. Texas may.
Well, but you just guarantee they're going to score if they just.
Hey, I will look. Barring a fumbled snap, I guarantee you, 4 quarterback sneaks from the 1 yard line, they're going to get in the end zone. And I know that's easy for us to say here, but. Like you were saying earlier, I think Sark overcomplicated it and outsmarted himself. And I think if he had it to do over again, there are a number of different directions he could have gone, but that's probably the easiest one, is just quarterback sneak 4 times, and eventually you're going to get it in there and the game is tied up. And I mean, look, I don't know if it's quite as egregious as passing the ball at the 1 when you have Marshawn Lynch, at the end of the Super Bowl. But it was bad. It was bad. And, we'll never know what would have happened if they tied the game up, but they should have tied the game up.
Instead, they went from down 7 to down 14 in one big sack and a fumble and a rumble. And it was over at that point. And
yeah, I mean, look, let's just say this. I mean, given that we had not yet reached the 2-minute timeout, I believe Texas still had two timeouts of their own. I could be wrong. If they just get sacked there or throw incomplete, if you don't get the fumble return, the game is not over yet. If they could get a stop and Ohio State doesn't get a first down, they still would get the ball back with, close to 2 minutes remaining.
Right.
Where they've got a chance. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good chance, but any opportunity they had of overcoming that, that disastrous second down play ended with the fumble return touchdown, because at that point there was no way they were going to score twice. So it was a great game. And like I said, a few minutes in, I didn't think we were going to get a great game, and it ended up coming down to the wire for all intents and purposes, and that's what we wanted to see.
Best team won. Best team won, and I don't have a whole lot else to talk about that game. You guys have all seen it. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably saw the game, and if you didn't, you could probably get on Twitter at J Brad Edwards and go ahead and rail at him like you do a lot. But
George, do you think anyone disagrees? I mean,
no, I'm just saying.
Who's going to disagree with the assessment that quarterback sneak from the 1 yard line 4 times and you're going to get in?
I think you might have some people disagree with you about the idea of whether or not you should put in Manning, but you're not going to have anybody disagree with you as long as the ball's at the 1. Keep shoving it up the middle, right?
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. No, Steve Sarkisian agrees with you. Look, Sark is a really good coach. He had Texas in position to win a national title 2 years in a row.
Yep.
They didn't get to the final either year, but let's start by considering where Texas has been since Colt McCoy back in 2009.
Yeah,
that was the last time Texas was really relevant,
and then they hit
Sark
that drought.
got them going.
Right. Yeah.
Mac Brown ends. I mean, we could keep going, right? But until Sark got him going, and it took him it wasn't the first year. It took him a couple years to get it cranked up. He's got Texas, SEC ready, air quotes, which we need to get into at some point, because quite possibly SEC ready doesn't mean what it used to mean, or doesn't have to mean what it used to mean, but SEC ready and playoff worthy. I want to say one thing though. You realize this is this 7 seed and the 8 seed, right? That are going to be in the national title game. So here's my point. Neither of those teams, maybe we can argue this a little bit, but I don't think either of those teams would have been in a 4-team playoff.
Ohio State for sure would not have been.
With 2 losses.
Notre Dame would have been in the conversation for the 4th spot, but they were not a conference champion, obviously, having not played in a conference. And that was a big deal.
Debilitating loss.
Yeah,
to Northern
they had a
Illinois.
bad loss, and we know in the 4-team playoff, that was one of the major criteria for the committee, was being a conference champion. So I would think you're more than likely they both would. And the way that the committee seeded, or I should say the way the committee ranked the teams at the end of the regular season, would tell you that they would have both been left out.
Right. And I think you can just tell that just based on the seeding. And I'm not talking about the automatic qualifications and then the automatic bye that went to the conference championships. I'm just saying the seeding before they then inserted them into the bracket.
Yeah,
right.
They were ranked 5th and 6th. Yeah.
Right. So that's a good thing about this playoff. That's something I like. I am not overly concerned about the fact that no conference champion made it. That's another piece of this. I'm not overly concerned about that. And obviously Notre Dame can't win a conference by definition. I'm not concerned about the fact that none of the teams with byes won. We talked about that last week. I'm celebrating the fact that I think we had 5 to 6 teams that could have won the whole thing. Just like we said going in, I think it's been proven. Oregon had a terrible game. I think they could have won the national title. Okay. Georgia, with Carson Beck healthy, probably could have won the national title. It's not the same kind of Georgia team. And Carson Beck, we need to talk about him at some point, didn't have some super great year. He's not, he hasn't been like this difference maker all year long, but they could have won it. So I would tell you that there's 6 teams that could have won the whole thing. That is one of the great things about the fact that all 6 of them had the chance, whereas it would have been 4. So I love that. Let me just say this too. We do need to go to the Orange Bowl and talk about them, but there's a couple of question marks, I think, that we have to answer. What's next for Quinn Ewers?
Yeah.
Because if Quinn Ewers goes out to the pros, he's not going to get he's probably a
Let's have that conversation guy when we talk about Carson Beck, because I think there's some overlap.
About him too.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Orange Bowl, Thursday night, weird time for it. Notre Dame, Penn State. And the Fighting Irish, who a week or so ago hadn't won a major bowl game in 30 years, have now won 2 in a row and are now in the national title game with a team that clearly is much better than some of these other national title contenders, air quotes, that they've had over the last decade. They've been in the playoff. They've They were in the final the final BCS championship game,
Second to last. Yeah.
second to last.
Yeah.
They didn't measure up. This team's built different. This team isn't great. Maybe it's because no one is great, but this team is so much more athletic and physical than what they've looked like when they've been in these kinds of positions before. That it's an amazing testament, really, to kind of what Marcus Freeman has pulled off as a young coach who just turned 39 the last couple of days, and is learning on the job in his third year, and learning really, really well. Notre Dame beats Penn State. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this Penn State team, and I believe we discussed this last week, this is a better team than the one that was in the national championship game, under Brian Kelly, and also reached the playoff a couple of times, the 4-team playoff. Are they good enough to win it against this particular opponent that they drew? We'll get into that in just a little bit, but they've made it. Look, I don't think there were very many people who would have put them in the national championship game before the season started. And most of those jumped ship after the loss to Northern Illinois. And I think what's fascinating, you just mentioned how neither one of these teams would have been in a 4-team playoff. These teams had 2 of the biggest shock losses in the regular season, and the expanded playoff allowed them to overcome that. Obviously, Notre Dame, it was their only loss, but Ohio State, it was the one to Michigan at the end, a Michigan team that had no offense, and somehow managed to beat them. But here we are, and Notre Dame, even though, look, there are, I don't know if I'd call them weaknesses, but there certainly are some areas that aren't
they
particularly.
Can't throw the ball. That's one thing. I mean, modern football,
they don't throw the ball downfield well, right? I mean, they're
right.
They are effective in the short passing game with the running backs, the tight ends, even short passing with some of the receivers. But yeah, they're not much of a downfield threat, and I think that's going to be a big deal in the national championship game. But with Penn State, they were able to overcome it, George. And I think the biggest difference in this game, you remember, of course you remember, you picked Notre Dame, I picked Penn State. And the reason
I remember that, I was going to bring that up to you later, but thank you for bringing that up.
Penn State is because I thought Penn State had a little bit more in the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
As it turned out,
a lot more, I think.
Well, yeah, but as it turned out on this night, that's really what lost the game for Penn State, is that they could not move the ball through the air.
They had no completions to wide receivers. That's amazing.
That was an amazing, and I wasn't shocked when I saw that after the game, because I watched it and I didn't see any, certainly didn't remember any. But this day and age, to go through an entire game, and this is not a service academy. I mean, this is a team with a top 5 ranking that is out there and did not complete a pass to a wide receiver in a national semifinal game. But that's how bad their passing game was. And ultimately, I think that was their downfall. But they ran the ball well enough to have a chance to win. And ultimately, it was, a bad decision and an inaccurate pass by the quarterback that made the difference as far as the interception that set up the game-winning field goal for Notre Dame. But give Notre Dame so much credit for keeping their composure after falling down 10-0. They didn't abandon their game plan. They continued to run the ball, like we said, the short passing game, and they scored just before the half in order to get back in it. And I tell you what, that fourth quarter with all the back and forth, that was, not only was it exciting, but it was completely unexpected, because the offenses, I didn't think either one of them was capable of doing that in this particular game against defenses as good as both of these teams have. And yet that's what it ended up being, is just back and forth throughout the entire fourth quarter. The team with the ball last wins, and that was Notre Dame that ended up having the last meaningful possession of the game anyway. And it was, I think, 2 evenly matched teams, probably more so than Texas and Ohio State were evenly matched. Like you said, it just kind of felt like Ohio State was the better team. I know you said you feel like Notre Dame is better than Penn State. I don't know that I feel strongly about that. I think these teams can play 10 times and go 5-5, but no question that after falling behind by 7 in the fourth quarter, Penn State was the one made the big plays that needed to be made late in the game to come away with the win.
Notre Dame. But yeah, no, I hear you.
Notre Dame, yes.
Hey, and listen, Riley Leonard, I kind of dissed on their passing game. Riley Leonard is a super, super acquisition from Duke through the portal, right? I mean, that's how these things happen these days. Through the portal from Duke has been key not only to their season, but was key in that game. And he doesn't have to be able to throw the ball downfield all the time. And I'm not suggesting he can't. It's just not necessarily his strength, not necessarily their strength either. And so it's not just the quarterback, but his legs, and he's good with the short pass game. Those are really important. By the way, Notre Dame was ailing along the offensive line as that thing went along, and they were still able to move the football when they had to. They ended up 11 of 17 on third down conversions, only gave up 3 of 11 conversions, which, by the way, when we get into the picks, is one of the reasons I think they got more than a puncher's chance, because Texas defense did a really nice job, as I said, against Ohio State. I think Notre Dame's defense is better, and Texas defense is really good. That wasn't a one-time thing. That's been the strength of that team all year long. I think Notre Dame's defense is really, really good. So I thought that was an entertaining game. I loved the uniform matchup.
Yeah.
I loved the uniform matchup of both games.
Both. Yes, you're right.
You know, and that has to do with their kind of traditional teams with traditional looking uniforms, right? And that's no slight to our fine feathered friends in the Northwest or anything like that. If you love kind of old school college football matchups, this is kind of the Final Four and now the Final Two for you. Because I want to say one other thing: Notre Dame, Ohio State is a matchup made in TV heaven. You know that, right? As a former ESPNer, it is a matchup made in TV heaven. Ohio State, I think, is the biggest ratings draw. Notre Dame is as big a brand as there's ever been in college football, just regardless of what they've done in the last couple 3 decades. It is a huge game in terms of just TV. So that's going to be fun. Any other thoughts though about Notre Dame and Penn State? I love the grit and the toughness of Notre Dame. I think they are the kind of team that will hang around and get you into the kind of game you don't want to be playing. And so my question is, can Ohio State sort of get out to that, make some of these big plays happen to sort of get out? Because if they can get out in front of them, I think Notre Dame's in trouble. But if you can hang around, there's a lot of things that could happen.
Yeah, I think that probably is the key. I mean, the last thing I would say about this particular game is, if you've watched these playoff games, you could not have missed the point that Notre Dame's field goal kicking was an absolute mess in the regular season. And Mitch Jeter, who came in, transferred from South Carolina, had been injured, and that was responsible for part of their woes on the it was I just thought the redemption for him after they had a rocky season, and he was part of that with the field goal kicking. Didn't give up on him. I mean, obviously, those coaches are watching guys in practice, and they know what they can do and what they can't do. And when it's mattered most, he has delivered. And Notre Dame is the type of team that is more likely to rely on a field goal kicker. They're more likely to not hit the big plays and move the ball and eventually bog down and need to get some field goals here and there, sometimes win those defensive type battles. As you mentioned, they have a very good defense, and they're more than happy to play to that defense. And so special teams, I think, is a big deal for them. And for that part of their special teams to have become reliable at the most important part of the season, I think is a big reason why they are where they are right now.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch Jeter hit a 41-yard field goal as time expired at the end of the first half, right? They won the new coaching term is now the middle eight, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
the last 4 minutes of the second quarter, the first 4 minutes of the third quarter, and Notre Dame in both of the last 2 games has won the middle eight. It wasn't as dramatic as what they did to Georgia in the quarters, but they won the middle eight. They scored 10 points in the middle eight in about a 5.5 minute span, something like that. But to tie it up at 10-10 from being down 10-0. The field goal that won the game, the clock was at 7 when it went through. 41-yard field goal also. And by the way, it was starting to slice on him. And all of a sudden, with a mind of its own, it turned left and began to hook. Or I guess it was starting to hook and then it sliced. I don't know. It depends.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. But it was heading to the outside the right upright, and all of a sudden it bent itself back in and said, "No, I think I'll stay in here." So, but tremendous game, and sets up a fun championship game. Before we get to talking about that, though, let's go ahead and hit a couple of those things we talked about. Quinn Ewers, and then Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. We ought to hit those.
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers has had a tremendous career. You've had people, Brad included, who think, hey, how come that Arch Manning kid's not playing more? And I'm kidding. But you've got Texas fans who really think anytime Quinn Ewers misses a pass, that Arch Manning should be in there. All Quinn Ewers has done is led them to the playoff 2 years in a row. I think he gets tagged with the problem that he was the sort of quintessential, or he was like the guy when he came out of high school, left early out of high school to go to Ohio State as a 5.55 plus star guy. And then he transferred back to Texas and he's really good, but he doesn't look like, an all-pro, a future all-pro.
Right.
But we'll find out. And maybe by the time you listen to this, he'll have made some sort of a decision what he's going to do. I think the thing that would surprise us would be if he came back to Texas.
Yes.
He might go out for the NFL, although I don't know. Maybe he goes into the portal where he can make a ton of money. Not that he's not making it at Texas, but wouldn't you be surprised if he came back to Texas? It just feels like he's done his time there or something like that. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. And I think that's kind of going to be a new thing. If all of the rules around NIL and the, transferring remain what they are right now, I think this is going to be a more common situation where you get a quarterback who has been good, but maybe not quite as great as the fan base wants him to be, or maybe the coaching staff wants him to be. And whenever there's a perception that there is a backup on the roster who might be better, not even certainty that he is better, but might be better, especially when you have a backup quarterback who's making 7 figures in NIL, it's like, yeah, we need to see what this guy can do. We're not paying him to ride the bench. So, in this particular case, I think everyone wants to see Arch Manning, and not just because of his last name. It's just because,
but mostly because of it.
Well, I think the more non-Texas fans want to see it because of his last name. But I think the Texas fan base,
his first name's pretty big too, I guess. But yeah.
but they've got a guy here though, is a highly rated recruit who physically is bigger, stronger arm. He's more athletic than Ewers. That doesn't make him a better quarterback. Time will tell whether he's as good when he's regularly in those game situations. He has started a couple games already and did well in those. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think the most surprising thing would be for him to come back to Texas, because for Texas to allow him to come back would say, hey, you are our starter once again, which means Manning is the backup once again.
Okay.
And so that to me is the least likely. I don't know, like if you're Quinn Ewers, what would be more, I hate to say this because like you said, he's a very good college quarterback. Yeah. What would be more embarrassing, to come back to college and go to another school, or to go into the draft and maybe not get picked until the 3rd or 4th round? I'm not saying that's where I'm not a draft analyst. I don't know where he would get picked. I don't think it would be the first round.
He's a 3rd day guy probably.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about my favorite now permanent hiatus rock group, 3rd day, but no, I think I wonder if he'll check out the portal and just see, because he can command a lot of money. He can sort of pick where he wants to go, so he can try to pick a place that has a shot at getting to the playoffs.
That's the thing. It has to be a team,
no question,
that has the pieces in place to contend for the national championship, because otherwise, why would you play another year of college going down a rung on the ladder from where you are right now?
Because you make more money, and you have a chance to elevate your draft status. That's why.
And the question I don't even know if he can elevate his draft status.
But if you're him, you have to think, with another year, I have a chance to put more on tape and I'll play better. And this, I mean, you can't think I can't do it. So.
You're right. He probably would think that. But to me, I just think he is who he is. And I have no doubt somebody in the NFL is going to give him a shot. It's just a question of, is he going to get drafted high enough to make more as a rookie in the NFL than he could make in college? And I think the answer is no.
Okay. I want to talk about Arch Manning for a second. I want to go at you for a second, just a second. Arch Manning highly rated, right? Clearly, he's talented. He's tall and lanky and can run the football and has thrown it well. He's got a lot of recruiting stars behind his, to the side of his name. But I want to challenge you. If his name was Mark Banning, would the Longhorn faithful have been clamoring for him when they started, and would they now be clamoring like they are now? Or would Quinn Ewers perhaps be a little bit more jaded? And I'm not saying he's underappreciated. I'm just saying whatever it is around him, would there be more positivity and less, oh my goodness, this is the guy, we got to get him in there, about Mark Banning?
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not going to say there's nothing to that, because I do believe there is something to that. But I think for a lot of the Texas fans, that was their reason for wanting to see him play, like coming into this year. But when Ewers was injured and Manning played a lot in that game and then started the next two after it, he made a lot of good throws and, big plays, passing the ball down the field, which is actually something strange that we didn't see as much of from Ewers this year, connecting further down the field. And I think that play, even though none of it was against a good defense, I think that added something to it. I think there was a little bit of evidence that was put forward here that, okay, this guy's not a fraud. Now,
well, he's not, and I'm not suggesting that.
No, I know, but doing it in that scenario against that level of competition is not the same as doing it in the big house against Michigan, as Quinn Ewers did in week 2, or in crunch time like he did in the quarterfinal game against Arizona State when it's 4th and 13. That's a completely different thing than going out and, hitting a few big pass plays against Mississippi State in Austin. So, whether he is that guy, I don't know, but I do think that he was able to do enough on the field this year to shift more people into the category of believing based on something they had seen, as opposed to just, hey, he's got a big name and he had a lot of stars as a recruit.
Okay, fair enough. Before we move on from Quinn Ewers, I just want to say one thing. Texas fans, and I don't sense that this is a big deal with Texas fans. Like, it's not that they don't appreciate Quinn Ewers, but Texas doesn't get to that game against Ohio State if he doesn't make 2 throws. But the throw I want to talk about is 4th and 13 in overtime. And he throws a dime for a touchdown because they were done. 4th and 13 in overtime is when the upset happens.
Yeah.
And they're going to lose to Arizona State. And he does that. And then they get the ball to start the next overtime, and he just throws the ball to Gunnar Helm for another touchdown, and they go ahead and win. So Quinn Ewers ought to be greatly appreciated. One other thing I meant to mention earlier, that strip sack and then the fumble and the rumble by
Jack
Sawyer from Ohio State. Those guys were, and most of our listeners know this, they were roommates when Quinn Ewers was at Ohio State. So they're buddies. And so it's one of those deals where what a wild sequence of events for that to happen in that moment, that critical a time. And I just thought that's worth us mentioning.
Yeah. So. And let me add to what you said. Like, I don't think there are any Texas fans who are blaming Quinn Ewers in any way for the loss to Ohio State. He obviously wasn't responsible for that 2nd down and goal play, losing 7 yards back to the 8-yard line. It had nothing to do with him. And even the strip sack on 4th down, given the situation, that's not a time for you to be under pressure, tuck the ball and take the sack and just, protect against the turnover.
You got to make the play.
You got to make a play. And so, look, he made a lot of plays, not only to get them down there on that drive, but the 2 passes, he made 2 beautiful passes to back out of the backfield for the 2 touchdowns they scored before that.
That's right.
You remember the play like around midfield when he was about to be sacked? I think it was Jack Sawyer that had him. And just before his knee hit the ground, he just kind of sidearm, did the ball to his running back who was standing right there. And it was a 3rd and long. It was
so not Quinn Ewers based on what you were talking about before.
Yeah.
He's not a great improv guy.
And by the way,
that was improv.
They also had a drive that was kept alive by him on a 3rd and long, basically lowering his head and just going into the tackle. Didn't quite get it. It set up a 4th and short that they, by the way, brought in Arch Manning and converted. But he put his body on the line for his team in that moment, as any quarterback should. And so, yeah, I don't think there's anybody out there that would be hanging anything on him for losing this game. I thought he played very well.
Hey, one more thing I want to mention, then we do have to get to our picks, but we haven't even mentioned his name. But Will Howard, I don't think he gets enough credit for how good he has played, how well he's played. When he transferred in from K-State, Kansas State of all places, and Kansas State wasn't really sure that they really wanted Will Howard. When he transferred in from Kansas State, and I'm sure that Chris Kleiman would say, no, we wanted him. But when he got to Ohio State, I think a lot of people were scratching their heads and like, really? This guy? But all he's done has been super steady, and he's made a ton of plays, and he made some huge plays in that semifinal as well in the Cotton Bowl, including the fourth down play where he took the ball.
Yeah.
And now he slipped, the turf monster got him, or he scores a touchdown, but he went for 18 yards when needed 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 or whatever it was. But he made a ton of plays, and I think he just sort of gets overlooked in this whole deal.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Kudos to Will Howard.
He is, I mean, if you're looking at their personnel offensively, he is the weak link. And I say that only in that everybody else around him at the running back and receiver positions appears to be like a future star in the NFL. I don't think Will Howard is a future star in the NFL. I'm not saying he can't make a roster, but he is on a team that is so talented around him that by being something like a 4th or 5th round pick, you're a nobody, right? Like,
and he's not don't get me wrong, he's not a game manager. He can flat throw the ball.
And look, midway through the season, I did think he is the reason that they won't win the national title because they're not good enough at quarterback. And to your point, he has been good enough. He has answered all the critics. And yeah, he does have a great supporting cast to help him out, which he didn't have at Kansas State. But when they've needed him to make plays, he has certainly made them. And I think he's going to make some more in this game. So before we talk about that game, the last one we wanted to bring up was Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, who had initially said that he was declaring for the NFL draft, then changed his mind, decided he was going to enter the portal. And then very quickly after that, it was announced that he was going to Miami,
right?
Where he will, we assume, will be the replacement for Cam Ward at quarterback.
And a lot of that depends on the elbow and the recovery from that. That is apparently a long rehab, 9 to 12 months. So obviously they're hoping it's 9 months or less. But and I got to be honest with you, on the Miami end of things, it's like, okay, because I don't think Carson Beck was anything special all year long. He certainly wasn't what people thought he might be.
He's not Cam Ward.
Well, he's absolutely not Cam Ward. He's not even close. Cam Ward is, going to be the first or second quarterback taken. Now it's a weak class of quarterbacks, which we can talk about some other time. But Cam Ward would be in some sort of conversation in a lot of years. So, but Carson Beck going to Miami now there's a couple things going on there. Miami needs a quarterback, and it's the only thing that's interesting. And his girlfriend is at Miami. Now we can talk about that all we want, but that was clearly a factor here. They're paying him a ton of money, but the only thing that's weird for me here is the whole idea that Georgia, if he didn't want to leave for the pros, is ready to move on. That's a weird thing for me because I get it. They're kind of enamored of Gunnar Stockton, the freshman, or he's not a freshman, but the backup. But I don't know that I saw a ton of Gunnar Stockton that made me think that guy's the difference. It's not the same thing. And I'm not even talking about the famous last name or not of Arch Manning.
Yeah,
it's not
I agree with you.
Have an Arch Manning sitting in the back who even got a chance to play. I mean, Stockton played fine. Don't get me wrong. But the idea that, oh, yeah, that's clearly an upgrade from Carson Beck, I don't know that I see that yet. Maybe he will be, or maybe they're going to bring somebody else in or whatever. But that's the weird thing for me.
Yeah, and look, maybe we're just at a point now where if you've started for 2 years and have not won a national championship and are not, I mean, obviously, if you're going to be a first round and certainly first half of the first round pick, you're gone. So if you haven't won a national title, I say national title because Georgia did win an SEC title with Carson Beck this year, even though I was going to say he wasn't out there for the final snap. He actually was. He handed the ball off with one good arm on the final play. So he led him to the SEC title, but I understand how with some fan bases, it's kind of like, all right, you know what? We gave you 2 years. Now it's time for someone else to get a try. But I don't think coaches look at it the way that fan bases do. If you think
No, they don't.
this is the
Absolutely don't.
guy,
Ever.
if you think this is the guy that gives you the best chance to win a title, you want him coming back if he's not going to get the NFL draft grade that
That's
he
what I
thinks that
don't
he
get.
wants.
The whole
Yeah,
thing. Right.
exactly.
So, well, it's just something to watch, right? Because it's not like Georgia's going anywhere, and so they'll be right back in everybody's top 5 or 6 or 7 next year. I don't know, maybe top 1. I don't know, but they're going to have a different quarterback. Who's it going to be? I don't know. How good's he going to be? We don't know, but that's something to watch. So we could keep going a lot of different stuff, but we do need to get to our picks. So
Our pick.
Our pick. You're right. We're down to one pick, one college football game left in the season, which is really disappointing in some ways, but here we are. And our picks are sponsored by the Faith and Sports Institute at Baylor's Truett Seminary, which I'm really grateful for. Think deep, lead strong, run the race well. The Faith and Sports Institute is a team of athletes, coaches, chaplains, and scholars who provide theological education, compelling research, and formative practices for Christian leaders in sports. They've got graduate degree programs and online certificate programs, and they actually have a Master of Arts in Theology and Sports Studies that is fully online. And so we're grateful to them. And Dr. Paul Putz, director of the Faith and Sports Institute, he's a friend of the pod, had him on several weeks ago. Sadly for him, he's a Nebraska fan, but they did go to a bowl game.
Hey, and they played Ohio State as tough as anybody this year, so they'll hang their hat on that.
Absolutely. I was going to get into that in a second. So we got one pick left, as you said, the national championship game, Monday, the 20th, in Atlanta, between two Midwest teams. It's a helmet game, a uniform game. It's Notre Dame versus Ohio State. And so, Brad, who are we going to pick here?
All right, let me. I guess I'll go first and be the party pooper because you go first because I know we don't necessarily. I think we're going to pick the same team, but I don't think we agree on how the game's going to go.
I'm glad you look the easy pick. I mean, I think Notre Dame opened up in that part of the game that we don't talk about as a significant favorite, right?
Or underdog.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Ohio State opened up as a significant favorite. Yeah. Notre Dame is a significant underdog. I think there's something to this Notre Dame team. I think they've got every shot to make this a game and really get you in kind of a fight in a back alley kind of thing, really tight quarters. And the question is, can they contain the playmakers for Ohio State? Both defenses are really, really good. So I think they got a chance. I also think there's a recency bias with us with Ohio State right now because they are playing lights out. They're playing to the ceiling or close to it that we thought they had with that roster when they put it together after last year. They're playing as well as we thought they could all year. They just didn't. But here's the thing, and maybe there's something, and we're going to learn this in the new playoff, about teams that can get hot in a way that you couldn't when it was just 2 games, semis and a finals. Maybe we're about to learn something about that teams can get hot, kind of like we see in the basketball tournament. That's not doing Ohio State justice because I think they're the best and most talented team. But my point is that they're getting hot. But they did lose to Michigan. They were terrible. They did. I mean, they're very fortunate that Nebraska let them escape in Columbus.
They were losing that game with midway through the fourth quarter. Nebraska had the lead.
Right. And they were just okay. For a lot of the year, based on what we thought they could be and based on what we see right now. So as we make these picks, we're like basing it on Tennessee, the Tennessee game, the Oregon game, and then the Texas game. And I understand all that, but there's nothing that guarantees they're going to play to that level. That's the only thing I want to say before I pick Ohio State. So I'm taking Ohio State.
All right. Well,
I don't like Notre Dame's pass game or lack thereof if you're trying to keep up with Ohio State. So I've taken Ohio State.
Okay.
That was almost a not so fast, my friend.
So you didn't diverge from me as much as I thought because you said what needed to be said, which is that if a team is capable of losing to Michigan and being in a 4-quarter fight with Nebraska, they absolutely are capable of losing to Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is a lot better than either one of those teams.
Yes, they are.
A lot better.
They are. And Notre Dame is just as a team down defensively, but they are more capable offensively than either of those teams is. And so I agree with that, and that needed to be stated. That said,
However,
I don't think that Notre Dame is going to be able to contain this Ohio State offense, even though it is possible. I think Texas did about as good of a job as anybody's going to do in this playoff. I mean, you mentioned they held Jeremiah Smith to one catch for 3 yards.
yep.
That's not going to happen again. That running back duo was basically held in check outside of the 75-yard screen pass. And I see, to me, when I look at what Penn State was able to do with its two running backs and the success they had running the ball with no threat of a passing game, I just don't see how Notre Dame is going to keep Ohio State with a really talented and really balanced offense from being able to get their share of scores. Notre Dame, they're a good defensive team. They're going to get a few stops. The question is Notre Dame capable of keeping up? And I don't think they are, because we've mentioned both things. It's inability to handle Penn State's running game that makes me worried about the Notre Dame defense against Ohio State, and it's their lack of the downfield passing game that has me concerned about their ability to move the ball and score on Ohio State in order to keep up. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that there's zero chance. Okay, Notre Dame could make a game of it. It's possible that Will Howard, we could have just jinxed him with all the praise that we gave him, and he goes out and throws 3 interceptions. And if that happens, Notre Dame has a chance. But if the game goes the way that I think it's going to go, and if both teams basically play their typical game, I think Ohio State wins this game by at least 2 touchdowns. And I will not be surprised if we're sitting there at halftime already figuring out what we're going to do with our time while the second half is going on. Look, that said, this is not a mismatch on the level of Georgia TCU a couple years ago. This is not a mismatch on the level of the last time Notre Dame played in the national championship game against Alabama at the end of the 2012 season. We already said this is a better Notre Dame team. They're going to be more competitive, but that doesn't mean that they are on the same level as this Ohio State team. And I think unless Ohio State helps them out, this is going to be a lopsided game. And I'm hoping it's still competitive in the third quarter, because I'm not sure that I expect it to be.
All right, so there you have it. I've got Ohio State, and Brad has Ohio State, which is not surprising. Let's look. We could keep going, but there's plenty of time. So let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back on the other side, and we're going to talk about our favorite topic, which is our shared faith in Jesus Christ. So we'll be right back on Gridiron and the Gospel right after this.
The Faith and Sports Institute at Baylor's Truett Seminary is a place where Christian leaders in sports are formed and equipped through theological education, practical training, and useful resources. As a sports ministry leader, coach, athlete, pastor, or student who wants to learn more, you can apply for admission in an online or residential graduate degree program, take continuing education certificate classes, and participate in character and leadership practicums. Start your journey at baylor.edu/truett/FSI. Think deep, lead strong, and run the race well with the Faith and Sports Institute today.
Welcome back to Gridiron and the Gospel, a faith and college football podcast. I'm Brad Edwards along with George Schroeder. This is the second half, which means it is time to discuss our faith in Jesus. And we do that with a segment called On My Heart. And George, we go back and forth each week, and it is your week. You are up to tell us what's on your heart.
Yeah, and we do love this segment, and I love the opportunity to share what's on my heart. And so often over the last few months, it's come out of the stuff we're working through, just like it does with you, but we're working through in our church here in Texas, and then the stuff you're working through when it's your turn to share what's on your heart in with your church way up there in the Northeast somewhere. But that's where I'm coming from tonight too. In today's passage, we were talking about Christ as the shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd. And it prompted me during my study to really do a deeper dive into that, the idea of shepherd. And it didn't all translate into the sermon on Sunday morning because that wasn't where the text was. But I just want to talk for just a couple of minutes about what it means when all over the Bible, there's this imagery of God is your shepherd. You are sheep. We are sheep. God is a shepherd. And specifically, Jesus claims to be the good shepherd. He says in John 10:14, I am the good shepherd. I'm sorry, John 10:11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, which is, of course, what he did. So what does that look like? A couple quick things. I just want to start with sheep. All right. We picture sheep probably, and we picture sort of some fuzzy, airbrushed, cute, cuddly, maybe a lamb, right? Sheep are really smelly and they're really dirty. And frankly, they're really dumb. Okay. There's a reason that Jesus, when he saw the crowds in Matthew 9, said that he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. They're smelly, dirty, and dumb. And y'all, that's us, people. Sheep need a shepherd. They were sheep without a shepherd. He knew they needed a shepherd, and he is the good shepherd. Okay, here's a true story about dumb sheep. You ready? From 2005, 20 years ago, but a true story, not fake news. Turkish shepherds watched in horror as hundreds of their sheep followed each other over a cliff, according to Turkish newspaper reports. First, one sheep went over the edge, only to be followed by the whole flock, according to reports. So it's about a 50-foot fall, maybe a little bit further, 50 or 60-foot fall. And 400 or 450 sheep died. Just going one after the other, following each other over the cliff. That's what sheep do because they're dumb. One guy decided, I'm going to take off. Wonder what that is over at the edge. And then he was gone. And then the rest of them followed too. As many as 1,500 fell off the cliff, ran themselves off the cliff. The only good news was if you were in the later group, because you were slower, you were dumb but slow, you fell on top of a pile of fuzzy sheep and you might have made it. About 1,100 made it, didn't die. Now, what kind of conditioning were they in? I don't know. But my point is, sheep are dumb. Sheep are lost without guidance, okay? They need a shepherd. We need a shepherd, all right? And the good news is, Jesus is the good shepherd, right? And he laid down his life for the sheep. He laid down his life so that we could come to know him and have a relationship with him and be led by him. And if you were to just sort of start like Googling references to shepherd in the Bible, sheep in the Bible, Jesus as the good shepherd, you could roll all through the Bible and it's amazing. It's amazing. Okay. But I just want to go to one place, Luke 15, verses 1 through 7. I probably won't read the whole thing, but basically Jesus is teaching, and it says all the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to him, and the Pharisees and scribes, they were complaining, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. They didn't like that. And Jesus tells them this parable, verse 4 of Luke 15. What man among you who has 100 sheep and loses one of them does not leave the 99 in the open field and go after the lost one until and when he's found it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders, and coming home, he calls his friends and his neighbors together, saying to them, rejoice with me because I found my lost sheep. I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who don't need repentance. And we've all heard this, leaving the 99 and going and finding the one. Jesus in another spot says, the Son of Man, him, came to seek and save the lost. He went to search for and find and rescue, save the lost. And that's the picture that he's telling in this parable, that he's describing and painting in this parable. I want you to notice a couple things. Jesus expected that people understood what a good shepherd actually was. Right? Those shepherds with those Turkish sheep from 2005, they were there. But you know what they were doing? The news report said they were eating breakfast and had sort of left the sheep to their own devices, and then that was a bad idea, and the sheep all ran off the cliff. Jesus, when he tells this parable, he expects that people understood what a good shepherd is and does, right? First of all, a shepherd knows his sheep. You think about it. I don't know if you've ever been around a bunch of sheep. I grew up in a city, so I haven't been.
I haven't.
But if I had 100 sheep and one was missing, I'm not sure I would know, Brad. You could probably have 15 missing. I go, that seems like a fewer sheep than before, I guess, but it might be about right. But a shepherd, Jesus is basically presupposing, knows his sheep. And he says elsewhere, in fact, in John 10, where we started, that he knows his sheep know him. A shepherd knows his sheep, and he understands one of them is missing. That's the first thing. He takes that for granted, okay? And secondly, the way he phrases that, what man among you who, if you're missing one of your 100 sheep, doesn't leave the 99 in the open field and go after the lost one until he's found it? He presupposes that everybody understands that a shepherd goes after the lost sheep, that there's no question about it. Without question, that's what they do. That a shepherd will go, he cares about that one sheep so much that he'll search and he'll save. And then he rescues the lost sheep with joy. The Son of Man, Jesus, came to seek and to save the lost. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but I just want you to know, I don't know what anybody thinks about Jesus. Maybe he's a good man. Maybe he's a good teacher. Maybe they disbelieve all sorts of things. He's the good shepherd. He's the good shepherd. He came to seek and to save the lost. And if you have not been found by him, he is seeking you. And he knows your needs. He knows your hurts. He knows everything about you. And he wants you to know him. And so as I read that, I am comforted because he sought me and he found me. He searched for me and found me. And man, I'm a dirty, smelly, dumb sheep, especially before I knew him. And he just went and got me. And now he leads me. There's other passages in the Bible that talk about that, but he leads me and he's trustworthy to lead me. And I'm so glad that he did. But if you don't know Christ, if you don't know him, my prayer is that you would come to know him. And I want to talk to you about that. And that's how I feel about this. I want to explain to you what it means that Jesus is the good shepherd, what it means that if you don't know him, you're a sheep. You're like a sheep without a shepherd. You're harassed and helpless. You're searching for all the wrong things, and you're quite possibly in danger. You are in grave danger of running off a cliff, chasing after the wrong thing. That's what we're going to do. And the Bible says that we've all sinned and fallen short of a holy God. And so we're destined for the penalty, which is death, eternity separated from God in a place of eternal torment called hell. But Jesus came, and he paid the penalty for sin, and he looks upon us with compassion, and he will rescue you. He's the good shepherd. And so I know we could keep going, and I could have gone about 82 different ways and shown you 82 different spots in God's word where it talks about Jesus is the shepherd and how God shepherds us and how he rescues us. But I just want you to my hope in my heart is that if you know him, you'll be comforted by the fact that he is trustworthy, he's a shepherd, he is leading you and guiding you, and he will. But if you're lost, if you've never known him, man, he's ready to leave the 99 and come find you. Would you trust him? That's what's on my heart.
You know, I think about the way that you kind of put sheep in perspective and what they really are. And I think for those of us who can see ourselves in the sheep, you know, that recognize how dirty and dumb we are a lot of the time. And I think it's very easy to kind of think about that scenario that's painted there and say, hey, you know what? Sheep don't really have much value, or they shouldn't. Where if I'm in charge and one of my sheep goes missing, but I still got 99, I mean, that's good enough. How much is that sheep really worth that wandered off somewhere? I hope he comes back, but if he doesn't, not a big deal. And the fact that Jesus looks at us as having extraordinary value, even though we are just like that sheep, but he still cares about us that much that he would leave the 99 to come look for us. And it's just a reminder that no matter how dirty and dumb that we may see ourselves. See, if you're going through things right now, or you've been through things, you've done things that you're ashamed of, and you think that, well, Jesus wouldn't want anything to do with someone like me. Not only are there so many examples in the Bible that that's not true, that you can find people that are probably done things much worse than what you've done that he embraced. But this story just kind of, wraps it all up very neatly. And, George, like you said, that's what it's all about, is that even though we really shouldn't have value because of who we are in relation to who God is, that he still loves us anyway, and that he cares about us that much. And that parable of the lost sheep has been one of my favorite ones for a long time, because I see myself in it. If you're just open and honest, you should be able to see yourself in that parable. And so I just appreciate how much God loves us, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's certainly worth us all thinking about.
Well, thanks. Listen, we either have been that lost sheep or we are that lost sheep. You're in one of two spots. You've either been that lost sheep and Jesus rescued you, went and found you, or you are that lost sheep. There's no other spot to be. There's no other position. And so my prayer is you'll be found. To our listeners, that's my prayer.
Amen.
For them, is they'll be found. So that's what's on my heart. And y'all, if you'd like to talk with us about it, that's what we want to do. We want to talk football with you. We'll do that anytime. You can find me on Twitter or X at George Schroeder. You can find Brad at jbradedwards. You can reach out to us on email at gridirongospelpod@gmail.com. We want to talk about Jesus with you. If you want to do that, we can start the conversation on social media or via email, and next thing you know, we'll be on the phone, because we want to talk with you. So that's what I would say. And I guess we need to wrap this thing up, Brad.
And I would say for those of you who enjoy the podcast, and I assume if you're still listening right now that you at least kind of enjoy it, our schedule for next week is going to be a little bit different than it has been every week of the season. Normally, this podcast drops on Monday morning. We typically record it on Sunday night, but because the national championship game is being played on Monday night, we're going to record a reaction to that game after it's played, and we expect the new podcast to drop on Tuesday morning of next week. So expect it on Tuesday, and then that will be the final game reaction we'll have, and then we'll move on from there and let you know what's in store for the off season.
Absolutely. So not Monday, because the game is Monday, but next Tuesday on the 1st at some point, we plan to have a kind of an Insta reaction published as to what we thought about that great Notre Dame victory. And of course, I'm kidding, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
I don't know. We don't know. So, hey, but listen, if we do appreciate you guys listening. You can find either one of us on Twitter, X, whatever. But you can also find our show on Twitter or Instagram at gridiron_gospel. And please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe in your favorite podcast app. We're on all the major podcasting platforms, as most of you know. You can also find us on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, and if you really want to see us, YouTube, and then search for Gridiron and the Gospel, and we'll pop up. And you can follow the links on the show website too, which is gridironandthegospel.com if you'd like.
And tune in next week. As we said, it'll be on Tuesday morning. Start looking for it. Gridiron and the Gospel, a faith in college football podcast.